Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Inforunners podcast, and it's actually more of a news update than anything else, because CRYTECH LAWSUIT had a very kind of quick update here. Long story short, the long-awaited CIG response has arrived.
Yeah, it came in just after we did our yesterday.
Yes, we actually talked about it yesterday, and then it came up. If you really want to see a good summary before we just do a very brief summary on this, please check out The Lawful Masters with Leonard French.
We'll link
French
it down below on the YouTube so you can watch it yourself. It's worth watching. But we're doing it.
I wouldn't say it's a brief summary. It takes about an hour, but if you want to watch the full version, but it is worth watching.
I skipped through it. You know how it had all the pages of the thing? As you skip through it, I just looked for parts where it showed his face, and I listened to those parts. So if you want the quick summary, that's what I did.
It was great to listen to a lawyer actually explain this.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of going through what he said and all that, it looks like a lot of what we kind of suspected from back in December. It was timing of Crytek. It was done as a publicity stunt to build bad press and try and get a quick settlement. I think very frivolous.
Maximum impact they wanted to try to do to embarrass, and so that they would do a court settlement.
I think I think you see that in the way that they actually went after the Star Citizen lawyers and said, hey, they Otwin didn't had a conflict of interest and didn't do this.
And they also lied about a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, and that was a blatant lie in saying that they didn't do that, because Otwin's saying, hey, well, you signed a waiver saying, yeah, you were okay with it. So,
let's go through this point by point. To take a look at this. First point is really basically CIG was given permission to make one game, basically, and here's the deal. They actually have in the documentation not only the PU, but also your Squadron 42 and all that nice jazz.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the biggest thing with that is the fact that in the initial Crytek claim, and even in their follow-up that gets talked about, they hadn't talked about, they hadn't presented what the game license was that was done. It's only in CIG's response to this claim where they're saying, where they're saying. That's right. Where they're saying this needs to be struck, it needs to be dismissed because it's a waste of everyone's time.
Not to mention misleading.
That was the big.
CIG actually supply the game license agreement as a document. And that's the first time it's actually been put public. So yeah, I just.
They deliberately withheld the GLA because it was, and it kind of tells you that
it proved them wrong.
Yeah, it proves them wrong. So I don't understand what they get out of this publicity stunt, because they're literally burning bridges. They've kind of gone, oh, we're not going to.
They were betting that Amazon, which is one of the people who's sort of affected by this with CIG and that relationship, that the head of Amazon, who avoids all legal things and settles out of court for anything because he hates everything, the dirty laundry out in the open for the public to see, would take a hold of this and say, no,
there was no dirty laundry though in this case, so I think they
it's not about dirty laundry. He settles everything out of court. It doesn't matter what it is, it never makes it out.
And a lot of people don't like to see things in court, and I heard a couple of people say that it looked like the whole Crytek claim had been done to. It was worded in a way to say settlement.
Yes. This is the thing. It's not about they were wanting to settlement out of court, but then they probably weren't thinking that CIG is not in any rush, because they're not about to put out either of these games. They can fight this case, and in fact, the optics on this to fight the case as opposed to settle out of court where NDAs are attached and no one knows where the funds went. The optics for the backers, future backers, and the tech press, like the gaming press, it looks worse for them to settle out of court than it actually does.
It actually helps
to
CIG
fight it,
because this is good publicity now coming out that hey, CIG is being smeared because, and the next claim here, CIG violated the GLA by switching from CryEngine to Lumberyard. And if you look at, and this is something where you really have to watch Leonard French because he explains exclusivity and all that. Exclusivity has some weird legal meanings. Long story short, it basically, and I hope I'm not messing this up, means that CIG is the ones that are supposed to use this, not necessarily anyone else that they're working with. So, I hope
CIG
I got that right.
exclusively, as I understood it, CIG exclusivity clause was CIG themselves will exclusively use this. They won't be saying, "Hey, Faceware, we want you to use CryEngine here because we're wanting you to do this." So it had to be CIG doing it to get around that. So, yeah, I to me it just seems like it just reinforces what we thought, that it just seemed a attempted cash grab.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, there's so many people who were like, they thought the sky was falling in. They were predicting, "Oh, this is so terrible," and all the rest. And like, I had the amount of people in comments who put me down and said, "Oh, you're not taking this seriously. Oh, you're toning this down." And it's like, no, I was pretty spot on. I think all of us were pretty spot on in that. Most of this was just utter bullshit. Most of this was a cash grab, and most of this was something very easily deflected. And it's amazing how much the community, whether the Star Citizen community or even the gaming community, panics or predicts the worst outcome. It's
at the end of his stream, he pretty much kind of just said, like, if I was a judge, I would dismiss this. So that kind of said everything.
The weirdest thing in this is there's a no damage clause in this thing. So this lawsuit is technically not even supposed to.
No, I don't even think that is. That's not a null and void thing. Like, to me, when I heard that, to me it was, this was a clause that Crytek had originally put in because they thought, oh, Star Citizen might go bust, and they've just paid us 1.8 million euros. So if they go bust, they're going to try and get it back. So let's put this in so they can't actually supposed to get it back if they go bust.
But it goes
so
both
to me,
ways, Algared.
It does go both ways.
Yeah.
It does go both ways. That's fine. But I think the original idea...
It's just entertaining that it's reverse order.
Let's put it in to protect the money they've just paid us so they can't get any more. But the reverse is, it says that Crytek can't really get Star Citizen and say...
Which is the irony of this whole thing. And that this lawsuit should never have even been filed to begin with.
Well,
just
that's
because
what.
Of that.
Well, the whole thing was it was meant to embarrass. It was meant to cause havoc, like on an optics level. I think it's backfired to a good degree, and they wanted a settlement out of court for the simple reason they just wanted to embarrass. They wanted them to shut up and give them some hush money.
Well, I think the fact that in the first updated draft of the complaint, actually took out the comments about Otwin.
That was their biggest mistake right there.
Not divesting himself of stuff, shows that Crytek have realised, we fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think when Leonard French was talking about the thing, he said, hey, if you make this claim about a lawyer, you're going, this is a very serious claim to make. And so, yeah, okay, you may have been able to get away with some of that stuff if you just said, hey, yeah, this was, you did a bit of breach of copyright, you should have still had our label on or whatever. But when you actually went after someone's profession and said, yeah, you have broken your oath basically to do this, and you've screwed us over in the process, that's like, you've got to defend that vigorously.
And he has documentation, and they showed it.
Yeah, it kind of shows that they lied there, and it looks like they slightly lied on other things. So when I look at it, I just think the whole thing is lies now. Because like once you lie once, in my opinion, you lie again. Like I trust people once.
Once you've exaggerated the truth beyond all manner, then it's a...
Yeah. So he signed. He had a waiver signed, so he did all his due diligence, and he has a signed waiver from Crytek, and they're just like, oh, this didn't exist. So they've just gone, this doesn't exist, the GLA doesn't exist, and when we hold these up above you know, or hide these from you.
Well, what you got to understand is Crytek was bought out by another company. That company is now trying to find whatever worth they can from the beaten dead corpse, and they're trying to pick it of anything that they can get off of it. They probably, and the original legal team from Crytek is now working for CRG, so they probably had no idea what happened in the past. They were just randomly throwing shit on the wall and seeing what stuck. But they didn't actually even know what had happened previously, as showed by the waiver, as showed by them trying to attack the previous lawyer. They didn't even know that waiver existed, I imagine.
You weren't here yesterday, Haze, but this is one of the things I actually did mention. It happens a lot when a company's bought out, they try to milk other assets and try and, you know, if there's companies that have split or stuff like that, they try and look at connections to see if they can recoup money from other corporations and stuff like that. And this is very much the new people. This is not the old Crytek. I want to point that out. This is the new Crytek that's been brought out by a company, not the old one. So don't try and blame people that used to be Crytek.
The new Crytek that is trying cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Yeah. The gaming,
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing here which I didn't really hear much resolution to, but I think with everything else, we'll never see a full resolution on it, which was actually the fact that Bug Smashers was a violation of that, and I actually didn't see a defense of that in the GLA or anywhere. So
maybe that was weak enough of an argument they didn't feel they needed to defend that.
That was the one thing I was wondering.
No, the GLA had actually said when CIG have the right to develop their game and make changes to the code for their game, and Crytek still have a right to manage their game, manage their engine, and make changes to their engine. I didn't see anything in that said, we're going to give you the updates.
Well, we're not talking about updates, we're talking about watching Bug Smashers, showing the stuff.
There was nothing in the GLA that said they couldn't do that. To what I said. There was stuff in there saying you cannot give this to a third party to develop a game and run the game.
CIG covered the main points in the argument, and the fact that they left out Bug Smashers because it doesn't really amount to anything.
Yeah. Bug Smashers didn't do that. All it was CIG within themselves showing how we've fixed this problem that we've had at this particular point, not really showing the code. They're showing these are the bits we've written to do that, how we solved it. So I think
at worst, they would have been showing sections of code from Crytek, but the thing is, you couldn't put it all together and use it. Like it's like showing the tires off a car and saying, "Hey, it's a Ferrari."
And you look at the classic one where they talked about what Crytek had done. Crytek used to do, was done the 32-bit rendering for positioning that, and we've done it this way. And then they showed us what they were doing in the positioning of large maps and containers in containers, and that was what we've added. It wasn't what was in the engine. So I don't see that's answered at all. I think people who've raised that it's humbug. Call me Scrooge.
I figured it was worth mentioning because that was the one thing in there that I did not see.
Captain Shaggy just asked, I know Bug Smashers didn't actually show the game engine code, more their own code they have added, and only what I think it appears to be. Yeah, he's absolutely right. They showed their own interpretation of...
That's what I just said.
Yeah, but you don't... As we are not coders and we are not developers...
Yeah. I understood most of the code that they put out.
Yeah, but there might be a singular line that was written by CIG and then a singular line written by a Crytek engineer. You don't know. The way engines work, it all becomes integrated. What I'm trying to say is there's no way to tell who wrote what, so it's just kind of frivolously bullshit.
I'd stick to what Captain Shaggy said, that like 99% of the code of what they write, what we would see in Bug Smashers,
rewrote most of it.
Is going to be stuff they made just for their own game.
If you look at Valve's source engine, there are actually lines in it from Quake. Alright, so I'm saying there are lines of code in an engine, if it goes from game to game, that just don't change because they're so baseline foundation engines.
So the basic lines of text that everyone uses because they're basic lines of text, that it's just...
Yeah,
no, you don't get what I mean. It was written so initially it doesn't need to be changed. And the other thing I'm trying to say though is because they're only showing screenshots of it, you're never ever going to build a full game just from a couple of lines of code. That's one little tiny section of, you're looking at 0.1% of the entire game.
The parts that they showed on Bug Smashers was always their own custom systems, their integration with their game systems and their physics engines and their object container systems, and this is all custom. This is not in any other games.
In editor stuff, when they show the stuff in editors and stuff like that.
Yep, that's it.
I do want to emphasize there would have been lines of code, and I'm talking like segmented
but not ever shown on Bug Smasher though.
That were from Crytek, right?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know which one was Crytek, and you wouldn't know which one was CIG. So it's all.
Unless you're able to sit there and compare, and you had, but you have to add the source to compare it to.
Exactly.
I'm just saying. I'm saying 90% to 99% of the stuff that was always shown was their custom stuff.
That's right.
Yep. So I don't see that point as being a valid point to even worry about.
I don't at all.
Which I think is why CIG didn't even talk about it, because the other things in the motion that they raise up.
If they want to choose that as their hill to die on, CO is just like, yeah, go for it.
Like, the other things that CIG want to say, look, this should be dismissed. It should be dismissed because A, they lied about Ortwin, they lied about the license, they lied about this. All these conditions say just toss it out of court. Hey, look, these are the payments we made to buy the license. Blah 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 blah. Here it all is. Here's the information they should have given when they first put it up. Oh, they didn't do it the first time. They didn't do it the second time. Now we're answering. Here it is. And oh, look, they changed this point as well because they realised they were full of it. So I just think it looks good for CIG. I don't think it looks good for Crytek. But then
people might ask why it took so long. It's probably the Christmas break. They're probably like, oh, we have all this. We're just gonna.
And they were crunching up to the Christmas break as well. They had other priorities. Yep. And you know, at the end of the day, the legal team's the one that has to dig through and do this. And if it's only one or two people, you know, it takes time to build a case.
Yep.
Especially when it's a case that's literally a giant hammer smashing theirs and breaking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So guys, what do you think?
Tech of the crying. Crytek. There's a reason why they cried, because they're text.
You know, I'm happy that they managed to get this out of the way so quickly. Unfortunately, in court, sometimes this stretches out for too long. They managed to get this out very quickly, considering it was over the holiday break. And if anything, I cannot see too much of the gaming press being able to throw any more shit on top of this without actually realizing that, oh shit, you know, this was a load of crap to start with.
No, you see, if you look at what they did, this wasn't held off so long. Because the initial complaint came up, CIG responded and said, hey, there's these things that are really wrong in here and you better fix it. To which then Crytek says, well, we're going to ante up, and they changed their complaint and brief to delete the comments about Ortwin, but they still kept some of the comments in there. Now, because they haven't pulled back and they still hadn't put forward the GLA, now CIG have now, on the 2nd of January, presented that. And so I don't think they did hold off and waste their time. They answered, and Crytek came back and says, yeah, we're still going with it because we want your money. And here's the other stuff. We've changed our brief. And now CIG said, yeah, well, okay, you've done that, but it still needs to be dismissed because it's a total cash grab and you're just doing negative publicity and it's, slanderous.
Just a real last thing to add to this, to be honest. Something Shaggy said, and it reminded me from the stream. They've got 14 days to respond. So we will see a kind of... Yeah.
14 days from...
Is that business days or actual roughly, 14 days?
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah. As was said in the stream that he said, where you've got 14 days, was basically that they've got 14 days, but different circuit judges might have a different leeway. So, roughly 14 days, could be a bit more, could be a bit less.
Well, it's 14 days to submit, and then when they actually get seen is a different question.
Yep.
That's if it even goes to court and the judge doesn't.
So it could be that, Crytek go,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, okay, let's go away.
Yeah.
It could be. Yeah. Could be thrown away. It could be could go to court and get thrown away. It could be that Crytek say, yeah, we don't want to go here anymore.
Well, it's basically move on to the next thing they can extort money from.
All right, you guys got anything else you want to add, or are we wrapping up?
I think we beat this horse down into a putty, so...
Yep.
We beat it down into a muddy puddle in the dry river.
Yeah.
So guys, what do you think? Is this the end all, or do you think Crytek might have something silly up their sleeve?
Do you think that perhaps the entire exercise was a complete waste of time on Crytek's part? Please tell us.
Leave your comments, and I was Algared.
This is Haze, and down below.
This is Dasein was here.
And I'm Execute.
Catch you around.
Take care.